Welcome, you are one-on-one with Wes the Sports Guy here on YouTube.com and always at WesTheSportsGuy.com as well. Plenty to get to this week here for episode 2 of One-on-One with yours truly. I'm going to start off today with the NCAA bracket. How's your bracket looking this week going into the Elite 8 contests? Mine's not looking great. It's not good at all. I had Virginia winning the NCAA tournament this year, and of course they went down in epic fashion as the first number 1 seed to lose to a number 16 to the University of Maryland Baltimore County Retrievers of all teams. But it was a great Cinderella story for them. They nearly beat Kansas State in the second round to get to the Sweet 16, but Kansas State ended up beating them 50-43. It was a well-fought game from what I could see with the highlights. I did not see it live, unfortunately, but most of these games were pretty good. There's been a few blowouts mixed in as well, but overall it's been a very hotly contested tournament, as it should be. When you have 60 some odd teams, 64, I think it's been expanded to 68 now with the four play-in games the last few years that they've introduced. It's been a very, very hotly contested tournament, as it should be. That is the onus of it this entire time. And as you can see with the Elite 8 contest, you have a lot of teams that weren't expected to get to the Elite 8, let alone have a chance to get to the Final Four. Kansas State is in there against Loyola Chicago, which I might add, I did have them at least getting to this point. They did not get to the Final Four in my bracket, but I did have them getting to this point at least, so I can at least take a little bit in saying that I got one right, just one, thankfully. And the other side, you got Villanova, the number 1 seed, going against Texas Tech. Texas Tech is the number 3 in the East region. Between those two, that should be a decent matchup this weekend. And then you have Kansas and Duke, 1 and 2. Not a lot of people like seeing 1 and 2 matchups, but with two heralded programs like that in Kansas and Duke, it should be a great matchup nonetheless. And then on the other side with the West region, you got Florida State at number 9 against Michigan at number 3. When was the last time you saw Michigan get this far? It was a few years ago when they had that little resurgence with a Tim Hardaway Jr., Glenn Robinson Jr. team, Nick Stauskas. I like to call him Sauce Castillo. If you don't know about that nickname, look it up. It is well worth the background story on that one. Nick Stauskas, Sauce Castillo. Regardless, the way I look at it right now with the Elite 8, if I had to pick with my gut, which most of the time that's what I do with the brackets anyway, and I'm sure you do as well. Loyola Chicago, I would give them the edge over Kansas State. I think they are the absolute Cinderella of this tournament. In every single game that they've played so far this year, it's come down to the wire, 2 points or less. They won their opening round game by 2. They won the round of 32 by a point over Tennessee, thanks to a last-second shot, and also beating Nevada the same way by 1 point as well. So that'll be a game to watch against Kansas State this weekend. Villanova and Texas Tech, you're going to have to probably go with Villanova on this one. They've been one of the best, if not the best team all season long in college basketball. Kansas and Duke, that's also another coin flip there with those two programs. But if I had to give an edge to somebody, it's probably going to be Duke just by a hair. I would not be surprised if either one wins the tournament this year, but whoever wins this matchup has to play Villanova next. So good luck with that. Florida State and Michigan, probably going to have to give it to Michigan just a little bit here. Michigan, I think, is a better team overall. Florida State is no pushover, though, at number 9. Look at Kansas State. They're also there in the Elite 8 in the NCAA tournament bracket this year. Let me know how your bracket's looking in the comments below, and please be sure to subscribe as well and check out many more updates going forward at youtube.com. Baseball's coming back if you didn't realize it. As you can tell by the hat, the sweatshirt, everything is pointing to April baseball. It's coming. It's coming very, very soon. And the preview that I'm currently working on right now is going to give you the full breakdown of every single team, going down to the lineups, the rotation, their bench players, what the bullpen looks like, also the outlook for every single team. How is it going to play out? I could say to you right now, it's probably going to be a very contested baseball season. When you look at last year, the Houston Astros were your World Series champions, beating the LA Dodgers in 7 games. A very exciting and hotly contested World Series, if you remember. And then the year before that, you had the Chicago Cubs breaking their curse and ending a 108-year span of not winning the World Series, beating the Cleveland Indians in 7 games, dramatic fashion as well, if you don't remember that. Looking at it this year, it's going to be some of the usual suspects. You have the Astros and Yankees atop in the American League from their lineups, and their rotations are pretty solid as well. The only thing with the Houston Astros you can ding them on maybe a little bit is the bullpen. That didn't really bother them last year. They won with a very sporadic and last-minute put-together bullpen, you could call it, with a lot of starters pitching out of the bullpen last year in the World Series for the Astros. And then you look at the National League side, the Dodgers are still stacked pretty good. The pitching is great. Kershaw didn't allow a run in spring training. I'm not going to go bore you with spring training stats. I know it means nothing because the games really don't count. It's preseason. What do you expect? And looking at it from the other perspective of the National League, the Washington Nationals as well, a lot of pressure for them to win right now. They have never won a series since moving to be the Washington Nationals, getting out of the wild card or first round divisional series is what you could call it, to get to the NLCS. They've never done it since moving to Washington. This is their year to do it. They got to do it, mainly because their star player, Bryce Harper, is playing on his last year of that contract, and this is probably going to be the first player that could command a $300 to $400 million contract next offseason. So you got to watch out for that and see what the Nationals can do this year. In some serious news with the injury front for Major League Baseball, Madison Bumgarner breaking his pitching hand off a line driver in a spring training game. That's a big loss for the San Francisco Giants. They're going to miss him for at least a month, possibly 6 weeks on the high end. That's not good for the Giants, who are looking to bounce back after having the worst record in baseball last year. I know it's shocking, from a team that won 3 World Series in a span from 2010 to 2014. I'd like to introduce you to a new segment I like to call Do You Remember?
You remember?
They remember forever. Remember.
Do you remember the XFL? Sure you do. The Extreme Football League, started by Vince McMahon back in the early 2000s. That was a interesting concept, and it lasted for only 1 year, but a concept nonetheless. It sort of worked. You had some decent players. You had some exciting games here and there, but for the most part, it was pretty bad. The product was not good. It was somewhat entertaining to a degree, but a few players did end up making it on to the NFL. Very, very few, I might add. But regardless, it was a interesting experiment by Vince McMahon, who is also the founder, creator, chairman of, back then was the WWF, World Wrestling Federation, which is now the WWE, the World Wrestling Entertainment. It's coming back, apparently. 2020 is the launch of the XFL. He announced this earlier this year, back in January. But now we have a competing league called the Alliance of American Football. This is backed by Charlie Ebersol, who is the son of longtime NBC Sports executive, Dick Ebersol. Charlie Ebersol, his claim to fame as most recent would be for a 30 for 30 documentary that he helped create with ESPN, titled This Was the XFL, about Vince McMahon and the partnership with his father, Dick, for the XFL in its first run. Pretty funny that Charlie now is the CEO of the Alliance of American Football, being backed by Bill Polian, a former NFL executive, a Hall of Fame executive, I might add, for many different successful franchises, just to name a few: the Buffalo Bills, Carolina Panthers, Indianapolis Colts, and so on and so on. He has a lot of good backers with the Alliance of American Football. He also has a TV deal in place with CBS Sports Network that's going to start this league next year in the springtime. And that's also one advantage that he has against the XFL, is that he's starting a year earlier. He already has a TV deal in place, and he has a lot of former NFLers backing him up on this as well. So between the XFL and the Alliance of American Football, the biggest difference is that the XFL doesn't have a lot in place at the moment. I would love to see competing football leagues in the springtime, because there's really no football going on in spring. We all know this. It's just the NFL free agent frenzy, like they call it, and the NFL draft. It's a big spectacle for the most part, but you want to see more football in action, and this is a good way to start. Time for our feel-good story of the week, and I've got 2 of them for you. First one is the Milwaukee Brewers, Major League Baseball franchise, reenacting a scene from The Sandlot. Now, with baseball coming up, that is definitely one of the dearest movies to my heart. I just adore that movie. If you don't like it, something's wrong with you. I'm sorry. Even if you don't like baseball, you should love The Sandlot. But the Brewers reenacted it. You can go to their Twitter feed at twitter.com/Brewers. Watch that video. It's about 2.5 minutes. It's a perfect reenactment of The Sandlot. It's going to bring back good memories, and it'll make you probably want to watch The Sandlot again just to see how spot on their comparison and reenactment was. And then our other feel-good story of the week is NHL broadcaster, Chicago Blackhawks analyst, but also does a lot of work with NBC during the NHL season. Eddie Olczyk, one of the best in-game analysts, not just in hockey, but in all of sports, is now cancer-free, thankfully. He announced this a few days ago on a broadcast for the Chicago Blackhawks. He is now cancer-free. We are very thankful for that, and we are glad to have you back in the booth, Eddie, when it comes to playoff time and the Stanley Cup playoffs. We love to hear your voice. We love to hear you and Doc Emmerich go back and forth during a great game of hockey. Glad to hear Eddie Olczyk is cancer-free. And those are your feel-good stories of the week. Thanks for tuning in. Tune in next week, youtube.com and westthesportsguy.com. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next time.
I tell you all the things you wanna hear. You'll ramble on about how I'm that fire.